Hello and welcome back. Brett here with ClickMill.co. Okay, so in this video, when we're talking about debunking moral relativism, one of the places that I would say atheists in particular, and in the next video, we're going to talk about some different religions other than atheists that try to ground some of the arguments that we've been talking about. So you kind of have a broader scope of what you can address with this. But in this video, a lot of atheists in particularly, or naturalists, like we have discussed in the last video, will try to ground morality, good and evil, in pain and pleasure. And I actually remember the first time that I heard this and it stumped me. I did not identify what it was. I was like, oh my gosh, hold on a second here. Maybe the naturalist can have good and evil because there's pain and there's pleasure. And that can almost, it almost got me because, you know, what happened at the fall when sin? Well, pain and death entered the world. So maybe pain is just a placeholder, a one-to-one equaling of evil, and pleasure is a one-to-one for good. Okay, so let's break that down a little bit. So is it true that all pleasurable events are good morally? Well, and Zach was pointing this out right before the call, if I want to have the most pleasurable possible experience right now, I'm going to go down to the guy on the corner. I'm going to buy some heroin or some crack cocaine, and I am just going to get pumped full of it. And I'm going to have a great time. But, you know, is that really good? No, obviously, we all know that destroys our life. And you're immediately addicted. And what's going to happen after that? All of the bad things that you can imagine. You're going to lose your family. You're going to lose your job. Like, you're now living under a bridge with a syringe. So is it pleasurable? Yes. Is it good? No. Okay, now on the alternative, are all painful experiences morally bad? And what they'd say is like, well, yeah, look, see, beating your neighbor over the head with a club and stealing their stuff, pain, bad. See? Well, what about going to the gym? As Zach has pointed out, going to the gym and working out and lifting the heaviest weights that my body can handle and just tearing my muscles, right? That's what's happening when I work out. I am inflicting pain on myself. Well, what happens? I get stronger. I get healthier. You know, if any of you have ever run long distance, it's painful. It is not a fun experience. I really struggle with working out because of the pain, but I also know that that pain actually makes me stronger. So is pain evil then? It's evil. It's morally bad to improve my body. No, that doesn't compute. That does not make sense. So if you hear someone trying to communicate that pain is equivalent to evil or bad and pleasure is equivalent to good, that does not make sense. You know, society inflicts pain on, you know, we'll say prisoners, what do you want to call it? The pain of loneliness, the pain of isolation, to teach them how to do good. And the idea then is that pain actually improves us. So that idea is very false. Now, what other people may come in and say, well, it doesn't really work that way. It's more of on like a big scale when we're talking about pleasure. It's like, you know, it's not really about pleasurable in this moment. It's pleasure broadly, what increases the quality of life overall. And that's obviously not heroin. And it's like, all right, well, you know,
Why?
what? Yeah, firstly, why? That's a great question. Says who, says you. But secondly, well, okay, what increases the amount of pleasure I have overall? How about, you know, being unfaithful to my wife and just going clubbing every night? And then what happens? Well, then I lose my family, but who cares? Because then guess what? I've got less burdens to go clubbing every night. And I get tons of pleasure over a very long period of time. Is that moral? No. So again, you can still come up with these long-term exceptions to the rule that, you know, pain or pleasure over the long run equals to good or evil or something like that. And not only
What
that,
about when your pain is, what about when your pleasure is juxtaposed with another person's pain?
interesting. Yeah. I would say another
It would
way.
make me feel really happy to go to all
Yeah.
the money that you have. I'd
Yeah.
have more money.
Yeah. And great. And so there you've got a moral conundrum. Now, one thing I would say is, isn't it actually somewhat beneficial when we consider from a Christian perspective, death to yourself? Like, you know, if you spend your life sacrificing yourself willingly to the benefit of other people. You know, you think about Mother Teresa or missionaries or whatever. They don't make any money. They go to other countries where there's nothing, and they live a life of lower personal satisfaction, maybe, or material satisfaction than they otherwise could have, not doing anything, sacrificing for other people. That is more pain, but that's actually better. We would all, I think, agree. Serving other people, like, and here we go with, you know, you got Christ. What did Christ do? He lived a perfect life, denied his flesh for 33 years in perfect fashion, and then was brutally murdered and tortured and killed on a cross, which is accepted as the most painful version of torturous death. And he, from the biblical narrative, willingly went through that. He's the God of the universe. He could have stopped that at any time, but he chose to sacrifice himself in our place. And yet, that is the most benevolent life he could have chosen. So here you have a long-term sort of pain, which you would have to say would be evil if pain is evil, except in this case, we would all agree that actually he was doing the ultimate good with his life, despite the fact that it was not pleasurable for him. So I think those are some ways that you can argue against the pain and pleasure. It's very hard to make that argument as soon as you can kind of see through it. So, Zach, do you have anything you want to add with that?
No, this one can go on for a long time because there are
Yeah.
lots of one of the problems with this is because it's so ill-defined to begin
Yes.
with. What is pain? What is pleasure? Why
Exactly.
is one better than the other? There's lots
Yeah.
of different questions you can ask, lots of variables that have to be defined, and they cannot be defined because they are themselves
It's
now
viscous.
contingent upon additional morality, right? That's
Yes.
what Brett was pointing out. It is a painful experience to go and lift very heavy weights at the gym. Now that can transition to pleasurable over time, and now we have a question of, well,
Is it painful
did
or
that become
pleasurable?
did it become, was it immoral at first and then became moral,
Yeah.
or is there more to it than just whether or not there is a physical sensation of pain or pleasure? Okay, well, if there's differences between physical sensations of pain and pleasure and emotional, mental, or spiritual
Or
sensations of pain and
actual
pleasure,
in some way, right? What are those?
yep, what
Yeah.
is the difference between them and which one is paramount?
Yeah.
And on and on and on the list can go.
Yeah. That's great.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
So that is a weakness on the side of the argument giver, because it's like, well, what do you even mean by pain? What do you even mean? And you always hear philosophers like talking about the specific meanings of words, but it's really important. What do you mean by pain? Because if you're saying that I'm going to start working out, I actually recently started working out. I've been pretty consistent and it is painful and I don't like it, but it's less painful. I'm using heavier weights than when I started and it's not as bad. So what do you mean pain? Like, the pain goes away after a while. And so then what happens? Does it change? Is the morality different in some way? Or did I become immoral and I just can't feel it anymore? Like, what's happening? This turns into nonsense. So that's a weakness for the side of the argument giver, is it's just so ill-defined. It's hard to even, you can just ask them 100 questions and they won't be able to really get any firm ground because it is shifting sand. So awesome. Well, in this video, we have kind of summarized the pain pleasure for morality that is usually based in sort of an evolutionary perspective when you have no God and you need something. So in the next video, we're going to briefly overview the type of worldviews that moral relativism is going to apply to, because I know we've talked a lot about the atheism, but I want to tell you who else you're going to be able to apply this to. And we chose this because of the broad range of sort of religious positions and spiritual positions and atheistic positions, I guess, that this applies to. So I'm going to talk to you more about that in the next video. We'll see you there.